Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. All right, 24 hours. You survived. You can do a lot of work in 24 hours. Do a lot of suffering in 24 hours too, I suppose. But the room's very silent. People are very diligent. So sadhu for your good efforts. Very few people want to do this. Probably most of your friends say, you're going to do what? 9 days, you're just going to be silent and you could do other interesting things. But it's so important to have inner refuge. You don't have inner refuge. Ooh, you get old, huh? When you go, body falling apart. So what we're doing when you get old, I am old. Um, what we're doing is really important for our own, obviously for our own well-being, but also for our relationship to our families and our society. Because once you have refuge and once you understand Dhamma to a certain extent, you can give a lot more. You can really serve and offer a heck of a lot to society. So my first teacher used to say that this Buddhist practice is the selfishness that puts an end to selfishness. That's a good way to put it. So it seems selfish, doesn't it? But actually, we're not developing an ego, are we? We're actually looking at ego. We're looking at selfishness in a very honest way, and very intense way, maybe. Um, do you have that expression on the ropes in Thai? You know what that means to be on the ropes in boxing? You know, when you have a boxing ring and you have the ropes and your opponents beat you up and you're down and to say you're on the ropes. I was on the ropes this meditation. I just couldn't stay awake. So what do? You keep your eyes open. I think I'm still jet lagged. But what I noticed, some people were doing some serious nodding today. And my suggestion, as always, didn't hold. They didn't keep their eyes open. So if you're nodding, as soon as you start nodding, open your eyes. I know it's more difficult. It's much more comfortable to do this, but um, you want to be careful not to get into that that Theravada thing of always being a nodder. You know, how many retreats have you noticed in sittings where people are just chronically nodding? And that just, unfortunately, that just becomes a habit. It's not immoral, it's not against the precepts, right? But it is kind of unfortunate. So um I mean, it's up to you, but start to like I would say, start if you have any sense that you're nodding, start your sitting with your eyes open. Don't even negotiate that. Don't even think about closing your eyes. Because if you're serious, and I've seen this a lot of monks, they just be like they just become comfortable in the nodding posture. And it's you know, again, it's not wrong, it's not bad, but it's not vitality. So I think what happens, I just watching myself, I just had to keep moving and very kind of, oh, okay, but I stayed with the game and I know that I won't become chronically caught in dullness. So I went through about a year of dullness. It just kept coming at me in my fourth year, maybe eons ago. Um, and I just had to keep understanding it. Like, what is dullness? Why does the mind become dull? And it's different than just sleeping. Like it's not just exhaustion. I think this is exhaustion. I'm just a bit jet lagged, right? So I'm on the ropes. Um, but anyway, be like get the idea of not settling uh on your forearms. Just get all your weight in your forearms. Oh, this is good. This is nice. No, you then like learn like in Zen meditation, they sit facing the wall. I don't know if you've ever been in a Zendo, but the yogis or the Zen practitioners, they'd sit around the perimeter of the room against the wall. And their tradition is to keep the eyes open against the blank wall. And then they also have, you've probably seen this, the Jigajitsu, who comes around and he has a stick, a wide stick, and he slaps people on the shoulders on acupuncture points. It looks like torture, but it's not. It's actually quite invigorating. And even if he doesn't hit you, you're invigorated by the next guy getting hit. I've only been to a Zendo once. It was fascinating. Different culture of meditation. And so the Jigajitsu would go around, and if he saw someone nodding, he would, and he's just walking around all the time behind you. Ooh, this is gonna be and then if someone was nodding, he'd put the stick on their shoulder, and then the person, oh, okay. They put their hands in Anjali, meaning they're willing to receive the hit on the shoulder. And then he'd go, I don't know if both shoulders forget. And it's not, it's not to hurt. It's to awaken. And so imagine Zen has actually got a whole practice of eyes open and very like they put a lot of emphasis on the strength of the body. If you notice Zen sitting, a lot of emphasis on being in the hara, really being down here rather than up in the head. And then they have a Jigajitsu going around. So Zen's quite a fierce. It can have quite a kind of, not military, is that the word? Kind of martial arts sensitivity to it. And I don't particularly like that style of fighting, but they've really addressed that. Uh, so so do be aware of nodding. Um, and I used to point out to people you're nodding, and then I just felt like a policeman. That's too much suffering for me. So if you want to nod. I mean, go for it. But just to be like an occasional bit of a nod is fine, but don't get into the habit. Don't let yourself get into the habit because it'll be harder and harder to get out of it as you get older. So if you establish a posture, which is like if you're sitting in a chair, then you basically have to get to the edge of the chair and hold your own body up. I know that can be tiring. And then with like as I was saying earlier, with your hands, then in Zen, they get their hands up here rather than being on the forearms. And then the eyes open. So you might consider that. And then I have seen, like in our early years when different monks were going through, I often tell these stories, different monks are going through the hindrance of dullness, struggling to kind of understand, because it's very hard to see dullness as an object. It's one of the most difficult ones. You can see anger as an object because it's got energy. You can see lust as an object. It's got energy. It's got vitality. But dullness has this kind of way of just drawing you in into oatmeal or kautom. I just get drawn into it. And it's very hard to witness it. Like if I feel anger, there's lots of energy there to witness it. How I deal with it depends. But so that's you kind of get drawn into it. So the difficulty is to see it's arising. As it arises, most people who are caught in dullness just become dull. They get reborn into the dull state. So how do you see the arising? Well, You see the arising through creating some kind of vigor, getting out of the dullness, establishing your posture, and then making an adhitthana or a determination to see what happens to the body. When does that dullness start to take place? What happens to the neck? What happens to the shoulders? What happens to the hands? And if you see that, then you see the arising of dullness. You see the beginning of the nivarana. You say nivon in Thai? The nivarana, the nivon. And if you see its beginning, then of course you're not trapped in it. And because you're not trapped in it, you can do something. So like I was here, I just kept moving around, looking, and it's boring, but not boring. Just that's what you have to do to stay in the game. But I was on the ropes, you know. Marek was doing me a fight, but then it felt good having done that. It felt like I had vitality in the mind from having done that. So I think the most famous story, and I've told this many times, but it's good to tell again, is I think it was Ajahn Jagaru. Ajahn Jagaru was he was the second abbot of Nanachat. He went to Australia and eventually disrobed. But he was going through a lot of dullness, and so he had a matchbox with a needle through it, and he put the matchbox on his lap, and he put his hands up here. And then when the needle would poke him, and then he'd wake up. That's the most extreme I've seen. I don't know if he worked it through. The most annoying one was my old friend Ajahn Ananda, who's died since. He would put a book on his head. So, we don't have much friction up here. So he'd put a book on his head, and then I'd be sitting there and flop, the book would fall off. I said, do you have to do this? And that was his way of trying to notice, when does dullness come up? What I learned to do was deep breathing and stretching as I've done this thing in these retreats, but stretching my spine upwards on long out breaths, maybe 10, 20 times, and then stretching and pushing down on my coccyx, pushing my hara out, coccyx down really, really strong, and creating a really strong posture of down and up, down and up. Very extreme, and do that for maybe 50 breaths. So very much like pranayama or some kind of yoga exercise. And that brought a lot of vitality to my mind. Now, having established that vitality, I mean, you can think of samadhi in that kind of a way, where you establish a platform of stability from which you can observe life, say, as a way of thinking. So having no vitality in the mind, I do something very, very extreme. I didn't do it there because I was a bit lazy, I think. I just tried to keep my eyes open. But that, like 20 breaths up, 20 breaths down, and then maybe another 20 pushing up and down. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But then my whole system would have a lot of energy and vitality. Then setting up my posture, I noticed this going on. Oh, there it is. There it is. So I began to be able to see awareness as an object rather than be the subject lost in the thoughts of dullness. And that exercise is quite against the dull mind, because the dull mind does not want to make any effort. It just wants to go off into whatever the clouds of thinking. Maybe that's a young man's effort, but I've used it quite a bit. And after a while, I found that having understood how to use the hara in my own way, I don't practice qigong. I wish I did. I don't, but I just developed my own way, that I could see that if I could push my hara out and over my chest, I'd have the posture from which I could observe dullness. So what I'm just saying is that the nivaranas, the hindrances, come up for all of us in different ways, and you have to work with them. You have to figure out uh, the craft. The craft of meditation is okay. This is this particular type of anger or lust or dullness or restlessness or doubt. These are the five. These are the ways that my attention gets kidnapped, and I lose that background. I go into the foreground and get lost in that way, and that just takes the willingness to keep observing and trying and experimenting and making effort and failing and just getting good at it, like driving a car in Bangkok or something, or whatever it might be. So you look at it as craft. So think about what I've just talked about in terms of dullness. That is a craft. It's a craft of the mind. And then once you've understood how to do that for yourself, then you've got the tools. So whenever dullness comes up, you've got the methodology. But if you think, if you never do that work, then you become chronically whatever. So say something like doubt. Doubt is a very difficult hindrance also, because it's got no energy. It's just got thought. Hasn't got any vitality. And doubt itself is an object. If you think of it like it's an objective experience as opposed to confidence, right? Confidence is a different kind of objective experience to doubt. But doubt is one that the intellect gets very much caught by. Am I doing this right? Or am I getting anywhere? Or should I be doing something else? And so often people who are doubters and that also can become chronic. They'll ask me a question year in and year out, and it'll always sound like an intelligent question, but it's always just doubt. And I'll say to them, it's just doubt. Yeah, but what about if and then if? And they don't see that the solution to doubt is not an answer. It's knowing doubt as an object. Doubt, Ben Yang Niang, it feels like this. And when you just know, I don't know, doubt as an object, you begin to know how to use intellect correctly. Otherwise, you're always caught in thought. So doubters are thinkers, and thinkers are doubters. Now, if you want to go to the silence of the mind, you somehow have to understand that a question doesn't necessarily need an answer. Like you might raise any question in meditation. Is the unborn the same as consciousness? Is sati the same as awareness? Is the fifth khandha of vijnana consciousness the same as pure consciousness that Luang Por Sumedho says? So what? Who cares? It's just a doubt. And yet, the doubter invests a lot in having an answer. So they doubt. Read. Kuba Ajahn, like one of the classic questions again, how does rebirth work? If you're really dumb, you'll ask that question. I mean, people ask me this question, Bhante, how does rebirth work? You've been a monk for 50 years. I don't know. Huh? You're so disappointing. And I ask him, how many monks have you asked that question? Maybe 600. And you're still asking the question. Where's the problem? Is it because they want to know. And there's some things you never know. You can't know. So to allow yourself not to know, I don't know. Am I doing well in my practice? Mairu. Don't know. Doubt feels this way. Then you begin to see doubt as an object. When you see doubt as an object, you go beyond thought. Otherwise, you'll just be always tripping around the thinking mind. So doubt, dullness, they're probably the most, I guess, I'm not sure, I can't say, each one of us is different. So they all have their challenges, but remember, we're not trying the unborn and unbecome are not conclusions. Like Nibbana is not a conclusion. 2 + 2 = 4 is a conclusion. What day of the week is it? You can have an answer, but those are constructed things. Nibbana is the silence of knowing, the silence of witnessing, say. Or at least that's the doorway, say, a better way of saying that. So in the other two words we have are unmade and unfabricated. So there is monks and unborn and unbecome and unmade and unfabricated. How does unfabricated get translated in the Thai? Anyone? You want to look at it? You just did. Can anyone get to what that unmade, unfabricated is in the Thai? My what? Uh, anyway, my Thai's not good enough. I thought it might be. Okay, maybe I'll just try to unpack that for you, how I see it, and then we'll have the 4 words. So we have unborn, unbecome, and I was suggesting, again, my interpretation is not anyone else's interpretation. It's just a way to reflect. So unborn and unbecome, I was kind of contrasting to that the idea of born and becoming. So if I'm trying to meditate to get something, there's a sense of becoming. But if I know that very sense of trying to get somewhere, if I know bhava tanha as an object, there's the unbecome, there's the awareness of change that's around anicca. Now, what's the word fabricated, I think, is speaking to idapachayata. Idapachayata is the general law of causality that the Buddha gave us and said, it's called this, that conditionality. With this, there is that. The arising of this, there's the arising of that. Without this, there's not that. With the cessation of this, there's a cessation of that. Very simple causality. So with daylight, there is the green of the leaves. With the arising of daylight, there's a rising of green of the leaves. With no daylight, there is no green of the leaves. The cessation of daylight, there's a cessation of the green of the leaves. Right? Very simple. With electricity, there's light, and there's vision, and there's the arising of light, the horizon. Without electricity, there's no light, no vision. So idapachayata is the kind of general principle of causality, which then gets expanded into paticca samuppada, which we all know very, very well. So the idea of fabricated or made is that the experience of green is fabricated. It's built upon light. No light, no experience of green, darkness. So it's something that is dependently originated. It depends. Right? My emotional life, when I feel dull, I feel dull. Is that an emotion? Maybe not. My mindset, my citta type of mood, that is dependently originated. It arises because of jet lag. With jet lag as condition, there is nodding monk. With the cessation of jet lag, there is cessation of nodding monk. Maybe that's not a good example, but you get what I mean. So that's the idea of fabricated or built or made, something that's made, and it's also the idea of a sankhara. Sankhara in the 5 khandhas is usually referred to the thinking mind, but its general formulation is something that is determined by other things, and it determines other things. So this microphone is determined by the tech which is built to make the microphone. And it in turn determines the possibility of you hearing my voice. So it's in a sequence of events. So it's not independent. So it's constructed, it's dependently originated, it's made, and it's fabricated. All right. So this, the unmade and the unfabricated, what could that be? Well, it couldn't possibly be the body. Rupa couldn't possibly be Vedana, because Vedana is dependent on other things. It couldn't possibly be Sanya. It couldn't be possibly any Sankhara. And it couldn't be sense consciousness, because sense consciousness is dependent on the senses. Right? So what do you have left? What do you have left? What is unfabricated? What is not dependent? The only thing you have is knowing, presence. Is presence fabricated, or awareness? Is that really fabricated? Is it the same? So one of the language I play around with is you know that you know. So you're sitting here, and you know that you know. What you know doesn't really matter. You feel hot or cold, but you know that you know presence. So what would you call that? Would you call that consciousness? Would you call it awareness? Would you call it presence? Would you call it puru? Don't know, but you get what I mean. Now you go back into your room and you turn the light on, and that you know is still there. It's the same presence, or the same it's consciousness, or it's awareness or knowing. Yeah. You turn all the lights off. It's all dark, but you know that you know. Turn all the lights on, you know that you know. And what is that? That's not fabricated. It's not constructed. It doesn't depend on the light. Right? In dark light, you know that you know. The mind knowing the mind. That's not fabricated. Puru awareness. So when you are looking for an experience, then you're looking for something that's made up. When you're meditating to create something like happiness or peace, then you're trying to fabricate something in time. So there's the idea of being born, and also fabrication of making something. Now you're not trying to make anything, or you're not also caught up in time. It's not about the future. It's just knowing the way things are, relaxing into open awareness. And that's what I'm trying to suggest. You relax into the open awareness of the way things are. And what happens if you do that? Well, you have to try. And this is why, if you've been listening, a lot of us are listening to Luang Por Sumedho's talks now. Very good. They're just so good. He's just so good. Even though he is my teacher, right? Because it's so clear at least to me, what he's saying. And all the time now, for the last 2-3 years, maybe I was trust and awareness, trust and knowing. Now he's calling, one of the confusions we're getting now in terms of linguistics is the word vijnana. Now, vijnana, when it's used normally in the 5 khandhas, is anicca dukkha anatta, because it's vijnana, sense vijnana. So sight, sound, taste, and so on. But Luang Por Sumedho is now using language like pure consciousness. And he's differentiating sense consciousness and pure consciousness. Or he's using conscious awareness. Or he's using awareness. So you have to really be careful of language here. You have to really listen. What's he pointing to? Because people are saying, well, consciousness, we say, is vijnana, and vijnana is anicca dukkha anatta. There is other ways of describing vijnana, which is more the unconditioned, and they are not very common in the texts. So I tend to use awareness, but not awareness of a thing. You know, when I say, I know that I know, it doesn't matter what the sound is. You can turn the sound off. I can go deaf. I can hear no sounds, but I know that I know. What is that? So I like to think of it as pure consciousness. I like that idea. Um, the background, foreground. This is where language gets very, very difficult, very difficult. But the idea here in the Bana Sutta that it's not constructed. The body's constructed, the senses are constructed because they're dependently originated. So the word we have is asankata. Sankata is constructed, asankata is not constructed. And what's not constructed? Awareness, awake, bodhi, this kind of language. And that's not something that you have to find tomorrow. That's what you are now. Because if you're trying to find something tomorrow, that's about birth. If you're trying to get rid of thought, to have no thought, that's not going to give you, that's not about awareness, it's about tanha. So tanha, and that's the genius of the Four Noble Truths, is tanha is the energy which is always taking you out into objects, right? Either objects of sensuality, so you're like absorbed into a movie, a really interesting, exciting movie, kama tanha, or you're trying to get enlightened. Disaster. Very wrong idea. Me trying to get enlightened. What could be more michaditi than that? An I trying to become enlightened in time? That totally michaditi. Can't be. Because who's doing this, right? And yet most of us are, I've done that michaditi for a long time. I'm trying to get enlightened. I'm a monk. That's why I signed up. That's why you feed me. And it doesn't work because it's about bhava. It's about becoming. What's the unbecome? The unbecome. So you see, oh, this is the desire to become enlightened. It feels like this. Now you're coming home. It feels like this. Bhava, becoming, right? So the Dhamma is here and now, not a matter of time, to be realized each one for itself. So what is the Dhamma? Well, is it just the texts? Is it like getting a PhD in Buddhism? Probably getting a PhD in Buddhism is not such a great idea. You have so many ideas about Buddhism. But you don't want ideas about Buddhism. You want the ideas to bring you back to the silence of witnessing or awareness. And so Lompa Sumedho keeps emphasizing trust. So in terms of this word consciousness now, in the five khandhas formulation, vijnana is used as anicca dukkha anatta, so that can't be. But what would you call that? You don't have to give me a word, but what is it that knows that you feel hot, that knows that you feel cold, that knows that this is sweet, that knows that this is salty? What is that? It can't so what I play around with is a lot like how things change and what's unchanging. So as you know, I'll ask you, listen to sound, feel your body. Notice the anicca of sound, anicca sanya, it's changing. Notice the changing nature of your breath, it's changing. Sense bases change. What's unchanging? What isn't dependent on sound? What isn't dependent on bodily feeling? What is that? Awake, bodhi, aware. Trust in that. So it's not something you have to attain. It's just it's more like you just have to remember to be aware. It's very simple, but usually we don't trust that because we have so much desire to get rid of things, to get rid of negative emotions. I certainly had, like, as you know, I had a lot of fear and anxiety as a young guy. And so, like, that's a good example. A lot of fear and anxiety as a shy young person and older. And what's the problem? Well, I don't want the fear and anxiety. I don't want the fear and anxiety, tanha. So tanha takes me into the object. I begin to struggle, try to get rid of it. That's suffering. That's the world. That's rebirth. Where the unborn, the unconstructed, what is that? It just knows fear is fear. Well, that's really hard to do, to know fear is fear, because I don't want the fear. I want to be courageous and I want to be happy. So then I get caught in the fear and I try to get rid of the fear, and I'm still caught in the object. But one day I say, in Luang Por, say, I made a system and just welcome the fear. Huh? What do you mean? No, I came here to get beyond fear. No. You came here to know fear as fear. That's different than trying to get rid of fear. So then I start to just welcome fear. Now that's a whole different program. But now, as I welcome fear, I'm beginning to abide as witness, and I'm inclining more to the Nibbana Sutta, the unconditioned, because fear is just fear. It's not who I am. Of course, that's very hard to do, very, very hard to do. So the tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, kama tanha are always taking you into objective experience, either through creation of a sense of self or just through the sensual objects that we have. And so the cessation of craving, nirodha, is where you no longer go out into the objective world. You come back home to knowing. So you have the brilliant formulation of Lumpudun. Lumpudun, right? Lumpudun. The mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. So fear comes up. It's vipaka kamma or anusaya, viradhammo. Fear comes up, not my fault. The mind going outside is the cause, not the fear. The fear isn't the cause. It's the mind going out to the fear. I don't want you. Go away. Vibhava tanha. Get out of my life. I want to be happy. I'm going to meditate. Okay, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to watch my breath to get rid of my fear. Won't work. It won't work. I tried it. Guaranteed. And then Luang Por Sumedho says, no. Welcome the fear. Welcome the fear. So now, rather than tanha, I begin to see fear as fear. So the craving ceases. Then the craving comes up again. Next day, fear comes up. More anapanasati. Watch your breath. Watch your breath. Oh, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. And then Luang says, don't make it a problem. It's just fear. What do you mean just fear? I mean, I'm terrified. It's just fear. Don't make it a problem. So I make it a problem, and then I don't make it a problem. And I begin to see fear is fear, anger is anger, greed is greed, just as they are. Benyang ni ang. And I begin to abide as witness. So the desire to get rid of these things falls away, and then the things themselves fall away. Anusaya begin to go to cessation. No fear, no anger, no greed, no delusion. Slowly, slowly, slowly. So Luang Por Dun's, the mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. So when I'm going outside into the fear, I am suffering. Then the mind knowing the mind, what's that? I think it's, I know that I know. I know that I know. I know that I know what? I know fear. It's like this. I know that I know. The mind knowing the mind then is the end of suffering. It's not the end of the fear. The fear is the vipaka kamma or the anusaya. And that's what you have to be very careful of, that even though you understand this, it doesn't mean you're going to be happy. Right? Because there's still material to come up. You might feel lonely. You might feel whatever come up, but that's okay. Now you know the refuge is awareness, change. So when I notice the changing nature of fear, I'm the witness, then I begin to see the unborn, the unconstructed, the unfabricated, the asankata Dhamma. It's quite hard work. I keep saying that. This is no This is no cakewalk. Do you know that one? I won't explain that one. Do you know what cakewalk means? I don't know. Anyway, um, but but the first thing is to get right understanding, correct? So, say with my example of fear, I had wrong understanding totally, even though I was very diligent. I really tried hard, but diligence with wrong view still gives you suffering. So diligence isn't enough. First, you have samadhi. And what is samadhi? That which has a nature to rise, has a nature to cease, is not who you are. Anicca dukkha anatta. And once you see that, then you're abiding as witness. So that's why I say, listen to sound, notice the changing nature of sound. Feel anger, notice the changing nature of anger. Unless you're noticing the changing nature of anger, then it goes away. Maybe not as quick as you want, it goes away. Whereas if I'm trying to just do metta bhavana to get rid of the anger, it won't work because there's still bhava tanha there, vibhava tanha. This is a common mistake we make as Buddhists, don't we? Right? So you hate the boss insulted you want to strangle the boss, you come home, and then I hate that. Oh, may you be well, may you be well, may you be well. And basically you're saying, drop dead, which doesn't mean you can't do metta bhavana to the boss, but you can be thinking you're doing metta bhavana, but actually you're just trying to get rid of your own anger. So you're using metta with aversion, which is a complete schlemazel. It's a complete mess. So first of all, you have to awaken, say, I hate the boss. Okay, now that's honest, and it's awake. From that you can work. You don't then indulge and get a voodoo doll and put pins in the boss. You're not going to do that as well, right? You just know, anger's like this. So it's awareness. So as you see anger's like this, and then after a while, it runs its course, it ceases. And then you can sincerely say, yeah, that guy suffers a lot, but I don't like him. Fine. Right? It's just honest. And I'm going to steer clear of this guy because he's toxic. Fine. Not a problem. Not from dosa. So samadhi is this kind of awakening to things as they are. And that awakened mind is what we're practicing. Not a technique, really. It's just the awake mind. It's, that you know.